I approached tonight's issue as a European citizen who is concerned that if his country finds itself outside the Union, it may face even greater difficulties than it has faced before. And I hope that some of these concerns may shed some light on the issues that will interest or affect people in Britain. And I hope that my ideas are not presumptuous or out of touch. I follow Britain, but from a distance. The more I thought of the issue, the more I thought that the people of the two countries may have differing perceptions of themselves and of their country's relationship with the European Union, but they also share common concerns. And I believe that there is much room to improve the already excellent relations between the two nations, as they both enter these new chapters in their history. I'll be mentioning that a little later as well. I'm sorry, I thought it was about the microphone. And I think what Mr. Maugham said earlier, one of the points is very key. We all wonder about our children's opportunities in the new dispensation if our country is not inside the European Union with all that it offers in terms of travel, education, research, opportunities and so on, if we get back to it. At the start of the Great Greek crisis in late 2009, early 2010, we in Greece suddenly realized that we were not only facing a dead end in our economy, but also a great danger of exiting the Union itself. And without going into the ideological or political reasons as to why Brexit would have been disastrous, I need mention only the practical problems of the country that will have to manage further economic and social decline while adopting a new currency. Surviving this would demand the strategic thinking, the tactical know-how and the discipline that, had they existed, would not only have prevented Greece's failure within the Eurozone, would have made the country successful on many levels. There was no chance that we would manage better being outside of the Euro and outside of the European Union. The international bailouts did help prevent an exit from the Eurozone, but as I'm sure all of us here are aware, this was achieved at very great cost, economic, social and political, and without Greece being out of the woods yet. I won't go into the figures, we might do that in the discussion later, and I'm sure Ms. Price will have much to say on that. But just very briefly, the debt is bigger than it was in 2009 as a percentage of GDP and as a growth figure. And the new thing is the personal debt, what people owe the state, what they owe their social security, what they owe the banks, and so on, which was a problem we didn't have earlier. We can discuss that later. When the possibility of Brexit loomed again in the first 6 months of the Syriza independent Greek government in 2015, Prime Minister Tsipras was acutely aware that the majority of Greeks had not given him a mandate to lead the country outside the European Union. They wanted change, but they didn't want that much change. And this prompted him to perform that great and embarrassing reversal, or korotumba as they say in English. You all know, he voided the result of the referendum, and this is a result for which he had campaigned very vigorously, and there was a lot of attention and nastiness that has been heard in this country too. When in Greece, his party had framed the equivalent of Britain's Remainers as men Evropi people, as elitists and quislings and not quite Greeks. So the Greeks' relationship with the European Union has been very ambivalent from the start, and it's reflected the political and economic situation within the country itself as it changes, and its relationship with the Union, which is affected by these changes. And I'll tell you a few figures now because they're interesting to note over the historical period that we passed. In 1981, the year that Greece joined the then European Economic Community, both Greeks and the British were rather skeptical about whether joining the community was a good thing. In the case of the Greeks, in October 1981, as we remember, the Socialist Pasok Party had come to power in a landslide, promising to lead Greece out of the community and NATO, and there was great excitement of this. So 38% of the Greeks at that time thought membership was a good thing. 26% thought it was neither good nor bad, and 21% thought it was a bad thing. In the United States and the United Kingdom, the corresponding figures were 27% thought it was a good thing, 27% was neither good nor bad, 41% thought it was bad. So more Greeks than Britons were in favour of being in the EEC, but not by very much. They stayed with the Greeks. They did their own korotumba at that time. And these are figures from the Eurobarometer at the time. After that, as the Greeks saw the
By 1990, some 75% of Greeks thought that being part of the European Union was a good thing, with only 8% against it. Remember that in 81, 27% thought it was a good thing. A few years later, 75% thought it was a good thing. And then in 2004, when Greece was at its apogee, when we had the Olympic Games in Athens and they went well, when Greece won the European soccer title, which was even more exciting, with membership of the Eurozone, 82% thought European Union membership was a good thing. This is the high point. When the crisis hit, these figures dived, with 58% of Greeks in 2010, when they realized we were in crisis, expressing negative thoughts about the EU. And yet, even then, they placed their hopes in the Union. When asked who did they think would help them get through the crisis, 37% said the EU was the best assistance, followed by 17% who had faith in the Greek government, more than it deserved, 10% in the G20, I don't know what they were imagining, 7% in the IMF, and 4% in the United States. They were not asked about Russia. Also worth noting are some findings by Greece's public issue company, which we can say is a company that is not Eurostat, the way the Eurobarometer is. So in May 2016, just before the Brexit referendum, where 55% of Greeks polled said they hoped that Britain would stay in the European Union, negative attitudes towards the EU in Greece were at 55%. But the euro was supported by 54% of those polled. So a majority didn't want the EU, but a majority wanted the euro. By February 2017, support for the EU had risen to 52%, again, showing a rise in confidence. I hope I haven't tired you with these figures, but what I wanted to show you was how the attitudes play according to the confidence in the state itself and in the relationship with the EU. And we can see that the relationship between Greece and the EU has been a roller coaster ride. Even when faith in the European Union has been low, most Greeks have wanted to remain in it. And it's interesting here to add a figure from the last Eurobarometer, the one that came out in December, where 75% of all European Union member state citizens have a positive view of the EU. That's the average across the Union. Greece, with 58%, it's still positive, is right at the bottom. And the United Kingdom is just above Greece with 59%. So we're fanatically clinging to membership, and Britain, which has even greater confidence in the EU, according to the poll, is split over what will happen. So with such similar percentages, the Greeks want to remain, as I said. And this is what made Tsipras, the Prime Minister, reverse himself and correct the popular vote when he had it tangibly in his hands. And this went far beyond economics, and this is what I want to leave you with as I come towards the end. It's far more than economics for Greece. Membership of the European Union has been the fundamental achievement in the post-World War II years. Aside from the trauma of the ongoing crisis and the tensions this has created between the Greeks themselves and between Greeks and some of their fellow Europeans in the way that the whole issue was framed from the beginning, it is clear that the European Union has benefited the Greeks enormously, not only through the billions in farm subsidies or the major infrastructure projects, but it's been a huge leap in the quality of life, in expectations of the citizens in something better, and actually an improvement in government. We know that things are far from perfect, and if we look at developments today, I mean, things are not adequate in terms of public administration and civil discourse. But the EU has imposed rules of civil behavior and demanded the rule of law to an extent that was not there. It has safeguarded democracy after a history of division and military intervention, and this has been very clear in Greece. Just look at our neighbors. This has been an unprecedented period of stability and prosperity through the European Union framework. And the euro, for all its problems, and it has been a problem, put an end to perennial currency instability. The historian George Dertilis's latest, and he says his last book, I think he's had enough of this, has the very apt title, 7 Wars, 4 Civil Wars, 7 Bankruptcies, 1821, 2016. I don't think he wants to go to the next wars and the next bankruptcy, so he's putting an end to it. The consensus is that it's not the European Union that is to blame for Greece's ills, however tempting it is for us to blame the Xeni always. The EU has been a positive factor in our lives, and it's difficult to believe any Greek arguing that we'd be better off without it. And much of this positive balance can be traced back to the very British values that have come to Greece not through a century and a half of efforts by the so-called English party in Greece as opposed to the French and Russian ones, but through the European Union. These are the need for reform, for the rule of law, for an efficient banking sector, and so on. Liberal democracy, the Enlightenment, they gained a foothold in Greece in this way. And though the battle between the forces of division doesn't end, and at times it seems vain to hope for it, the European Union has offered protection at many levels and also made us stronger. In Britain, by definition, those who want Brexit believe that EU membership weakens Britain. What lifts Greece, they see as a burden to their country. I will not get into the arguments for and against Brexit. I'm sure you have enough of them already. But what I believe is that losing Britain will be a fundamental loss to the European Union and to all its members at a time when the Union needs a combination of vision and pragmatism to meet its current challenges. And the British could always be counted on for pragmatism and on the need to make things work. And it is this need that will strengthen the bond between Greece and Britain after Brexit or Grexit or both or whatever form they take. Greece may no longer have to depend on Britain as a military ally as it did right from its independence, as a friend that it needed to survive and right up until the last civil war. But the two countries share much, and they have to defend their ties in education, in culture, in the arts, in tourism, in shipping, in trade, in defense, in health, everything that is there. In all sectors already, thankfully, there are people and agencies on both sides working on new opportunities, strengthening these ties every day. There is the potential for a special relationship. I don't want to take away your friendship with rapidly disappearing United States, but we can have our own special relationship where both countries will benefit by providing opportunities to their citizens to move around freely, whether working or retired. European Union, whether working or retired, and this is one of the things I'm thinking of, is that Greece has a very rapidly aging population. Britain has, we'll talk about that, many opportunities to expand into that. So the European Union membership, when it came to Greece, brought a new equality between Greece and the United Kingdom, which was not there before, and it facilitated relations at all levels, and those levels have grown stronger within the European Union. And they can continue to grow stronger because although we're very different countries and with very different perceptions of ourselves and each other, and our history is different but intersects very often, as you know, we do know each other in a very, very almost intimate way, I think, more than other countries share. I think from ancient Greece, to Hercule Poirot. I mean, Agatha Christie is always a hit in Greece. And I think that as long as there are people of goodwill and understanding on both sides, and there are many, Greece and Britain will continue to build on their shared past. And if I may have a minute, because I had some thoughts when I was reading this on the plane, and then the best part came to me, is that what the Greeks can learn from the British. One of the finest minds of Greece of the last century was Yorgos Theotokas, an intellectual writer. And he, although he'd been educated in the French way, he said that Britain had reached a superior model of political freedom. And he hoped that the alliance between Greece and the UK would facilitate the transmission of this model to Greece, something that had not been done in the previous 100 and so years. He worried that the Cyprus issue would tear the two countries apart, and we know what happened. But these he named as the absolute respect for the principles of liberty and the rule of law, the love of tradition, freedom from dogma, the ability to adapt socially, economically, and politically, avoiding violence and dictatorship. And I'd like to add, we'd also like to learn civilized behavior in soccer stadiums. I mean, I compare West Ham's almost ritual pitch invasion on Saturday with our armed intervention on Sunday. which you're all aware of. We could also learn about the assimilation of immigrants and multiculturalism to the extent that it has been a success, plus its problems. We'd like to know how to control oligarchs to the extent that they are controllable. We should learn to manage our own real estate rather than buying in Britain all the time. I learned the tricks about that. We should become more pragmatic in exploiting opportunities and facing challenges. We need to be extroverts in education, and I don't mean just the very sore point of the Greeks not having non-state universities, but when I've thought of Cambridge and Oxford and how they started out with monks, and I also thought of Athos as it started out with monks and the different directions that they took, each valid, but each playing a different role. And I think that the Greeks and the Britons have many opportunities to look at, whether they remain in the European Union or not. And I come back to this, without the one being a hegemonic power and the other a dependent state, and I think that is the good foundation for the future. And I'd like to say what I would like to see the British not learning from the Greeks, and that is arbitrary behavior and haphazard rule of law, confrontational politics and division, nationalism and nativism, giving free rein to the rich and impunity to small vocal groups, having exorbitant taxes without the corresponding services, having a public administration whose main aim is to preserve itself as it is, and of course, don't have a highly partisan news media. And as I mentioned all of these things, I was thinking of the last few months, a couple of years, how the situation in Britain has been changing, and I'd like my last word on this to be, look at Greece and its problems and try to avoid them. Okay.
Nikos, thank you.